Hi, I'm Amy,
And I'm Simona.
and this is the
And
Caffeinated Librarian, and we're working on a 3-second delay today, apparently. So work with us here. And this is the birthday celebration episode of Harry Potter. So, Simona, how old will Harry Potter be turning? Because I forgot.
he's going to be 39.
That's what I thought. Okay, cool. So, we'll be talking about Harry Potter. We'll be talking about the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on where in the world you happen to be when that book was coming out and is still being published. I do have one prepared statement before we really get into it regarding J.K. Rowling. I have to mention that my love of Harry Potter, the universe and its characters remains unchanged despite the author's beliefs about non-binary identities. The world that she's created doesn't in any way support her stated views. And it's served through the years as a place of refuge for people who have been hurt or bullied because of their differences. So I believe that non-binary identities are just as real as and valid as binary ones, and I am and forever will be an ally. And that is the end of my prepared statement. Nothing else is prepared for today.
Okay, yeah, and as Amy has, it's hard to figure out where to talk after hearing that. But yes, so the author has made several statements regarding many issues. That's just one of the many statements that she's made. But if you are someone who whose opinion of her works has changed because of any statements that she made. I'm sorry if that is indeed the case. I do not agree with everything that she tweets, but as Amy said earlier, I still enjoy her world. I still enjoy the characters that she created, and I still believe that there is something to be found in her works that can be sources of comfort, sources of encouragement for you if you are experiencing difficulties, if you are someone who has been made to feel unsafe or unloved or discriminated against because of your beliefs or who you are, what you may identify as. So jumping off of that, what I thought we could discuss would be moments in the first book that we really enjoyed or moments that stood out for us. So if Amy, if there are any moments in particular that you liked, just to start it off.
I have so many. I reread this and I did not get all the way through it, but at least I remember the end a lot better than I remember the beginning. So I'm in better shape than I was. I remember the end really well, so I'm in much better shape. But I kind of really felt for Neville Longbottom in this reading. I was struck by how made fun of he is, and I was kind of curious about what the internet thought about Neville Longbottom as a character in the book. Like, why is it's great as an example of Harry, Ron, and Hermione's ability to accept him and defy how everybody else felt about him, and or going with the crappier nature of people to laugh at people that are kind of accident prone like me. So I actually found on Tor.com an article that is entitled "Why Neville Longbottom is the most important person in Harry Potter," and I'm just going to run back to that so I can refer to it. And of course, I can't find it now because that's the way my life works. Oh, I had it wrong. Never mind. Okay. So here's why the author, who is Emmett Asher Perrin, believes that's the case. So he makes a really compelling argument that um, the the collection of characters is really just another iteration of what happened with Harry's parents and James Potter, Harry's father's dad, Harry Potter. Blah, blah. I can't talk today. I am sorry. Harry Potter's father, his friends, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin are iterated as Ron and Hermione, and Ginny as Lily Evans, who married James, Draco as Severus, a natural foil to Harry, and Neville Longbottom is Peter Pettigrew. And you might recall that he turned out to be kind of a horrible person, but it's made kind of an argument is made in this article that Neville made different decisions than Peter. Like, he didn't have any respect from higher up wizarding families. He's easy to make fun of, all of that stuff. And Remus and Sirius and James kind of took in Pettigrew in the same circumstances, but where Pettigrew was kind of wishy-washy and kind of went with the side that gave him the most power, Neville stood up for his beliefs and was like quietly strong throughout. And I just feel that whether or not it's in the first book that this happens, which it really doesn't, that Neville kind of comes to the fore, I found that it was an excellent character background to read this through.
Yeah, and Neville definitely is one of those characters. I think in general, I would agree that the fandom does like his character. But I can definitely see, because it happens with many stories, how current characters are parallels for like past characters, and I can definitely see that. And I agree where Neville differs from Pettigrew is that Neville has a sense of honor, a sense of doing what is right, whereas Pettigrew is pretty much self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm not sure if Pettigrew ever went into what his family thought about him or what their expectations of him were. But listening to Neville when he talks to his friends about how his own family feels about him, like even in the first story where he mentions that he wasn't even sure if he was going to attend Hogwarts because his family believed that he might be a squib, and how even the circumstances under which they found out he wasn't was one of his uncles throwing him off a balcony or out a window, and he bounced back unharmed, and everyone was so happy. Which, when you really think about it, what if he had died? I don't know. I like rereading that. I was like, well, you could have killed your nephew. But I another indication of the prejudice that exists within the wizarding community, and even among characters who are, for the most part, good characters, hints of their prejudice do creep out. I was even thinking about Hagrid when he first sees Harry, and when Harry's with his aunt and uncle and cousin, they're in that like shack in the middle of the ocean or wherever they are.
Yes.
And he's very dismissive of the Dursleys, which is somewhat understandable because the Dursleys up until this point have done nothing to really earn anyone's sympathy or anyone's good thoughts. But even the way he refers to them as, oh, like the Muggles, ignore what the Muggles tell you. And I was even thinking about other moments in Diagon Alley where he's talking about Muggles, or he's even talking about Slytherins, which goes back to like a previous point where I made, where like no one good seems to ever go into that house. And he's very prejudiced against them. And considering the amount of prejudice that he will experience in later books, especially when it's found out that he's part giant, it's kind of odd. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say odd, because there people will have prejudice even if they may belong to a group that experiences prejudice.
Right.
But yeah, I just
Or they find
to
out
bring that
later,
up.
like when white supremacists find out that they're related to people of color, and they have to kind of reassess their identity and other people's identities because of that. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that you see prejudice throughout. You see Hagrid's prejudice, you see like Slytherin's prejudice, and I agree that you don't see many good people come out of Slytherin in the book, but Snape is our biggest argument that good people do. They might take a more winding path, but definitely Snape chose a better path. And like even in this book, when at the end, because I'm skipping, but that we find out that he wasn't trying to hurt Harry during the Quidditch match. He was trying to protect him. There are definitely arguments to be made that calculating people, which is really what Slytherin is. It's more about strategizing and you know, and getting yourself, you know, in first. And not that that's like an amazing thing in terms of keeping the world churning as a good place to live, but definitely, I mean, I would argue that Steve Jobs, I can't pronounce that at all. The founder of Apple. Um, now watch, it'll be like it's David or something, but one could argue that he has the traits of a Slytherin, and business leaders and people that do make large waves in the world, for good or for bad, can be argued to have those traits.
Yeah, I think what bothers me, and I understand that the first book started off written for children, although not young children. I would say this is the first book is middle grade appropriate. So one could argue, oh, the simplicity of characterization is because, oh, this is a book maybe for middle graders. But as the story progresses, the reader ages with the story. But Rowling, I'm sorry, characterization of the Slytherins never does change. And I had this argument with some of my book, not argument, that's the wrong choice of words, but I
Mm-hmm.
had this discussion with my members about, you know, the examples that are shown for the quote unquote good Slytherins often aren't good enough. Like Snape, yes, he's a Slytherin. While he's not evil, I have a hard time liking his character. You have Slughorn. Yes, he's not evil. At worst, you could kind of accuse him of cowardice. But again, he's not the best example for a Slytherin. Now, granted, there are characters that belong in Gryffindor. Sirius Black is a good example where he's detestable. I'm sure he's a fan favorite, but he is not someone I would ever want to hang out with. And he's a Gryffindor.
Can you
But
give examples
overall,
of that?
sure.
Not,
Even
I'm not
first of
arguing. I'm just
all,
like asking.
no, no. Well, first of all, his entire interaction with Snape, when they first meet on the train, when their first years at Hogwarts, um, uh, Snape overhears Sirius and James talking about how they happen to be Gryffindor, you know, and James says, "For the brave and the true," or something like that. And Snape makes the comment, well, if you prefer brawn over brains, or if you have more brawn than brains. So he's not exactly being nice either.
Mm-hmm.
But and Sirius says, well, see, you have neither. Where do you hope to go? You know, and then it's like
Mm.
other things. His overall, he participates in the bullying of Snape. I mean, while you could make the argument that Snape doesn't make himself likable, in the
Mm-hmm.
few examples where you see Sirius participating in the bullying of Snape, Snape hasn't yet done anything to them. It's not, for example, I don't know, that
No.
Snape is making their lives miserable. This
Yeah.
is a natural reaction. Sirius is lashing out. Or, you know, even if you see Sirius and his, you know, response to like his house elf because I'm currently rereading the 5th book.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have much compassion to himself. Granted, Creature is extremely prejudiced. He's not exactly a likable character. But whereas Hermione, who is the actual victim of his prejudice, being, a half-blood, she is still able to be compassionate and to be somewhat understanding, while he is completely like he doesn't care whatsoever.
Mm.
And I'm sure I could find other examples as well, of basically that he's not the best character. And even Remus Lupin,
Yeah. Well, James
whom I
wasn't
do
the
like.
most fantastic either. Like,
No, and the excuse was that he was young. Well, I
right.
understand that when you're young, but there are many young people that don't behave in the way that he did for the sake of attention or for the sake of, I guess, kicks. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he changed as he got older. We really don't know.
Right.
Because I hope that he did if Lily married him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, even Remus Lupin, another Gryffindor, while he never participated in the bullying, he never did anything to stop it. And I'm glad that he does admit that in the books, where he says, I didn't participate, but I never did anything to discourage it.
Right.
Um, yeah, so those are just a few examples. So it's always bothered me that the Slytherins, it's like they're the house when Voldemort has attacked the school in the final book. They're the ones who are ready to hand over Harry. And I'm like, there's no good person among that house. It's like they're all manipulative, conniving, and devious. It's always bothered me because that characterization remains steady throughout all 7 books. There's not one example of a Slytherin
Right.
who is supportive of Harry, who's not trying to sabotage something. And it's like, that can't be. Statistically, it's impossible. And even the characteristics that Slytherin is known for, they're not inherently evil. There's nothing wrong with ambition,
Right.
but it's almost as if with ambitious people, there's nothing wrong with having ambition. It's how you go about it. It's if you're like stepping on people to get to, then I could say, yes, your ambition is twisted. But being an ambitious individual is not evil.
Right.
So,
I
but
think
anyway.
I think it's that's an interesting point to raise, and does actually relate to the first book. Um, not that this stuff
I
doesn't.
know
It's
we
just
jumped all over the place.
uh-oh, we're off topic. But um, nature versus nurture. If Slytherin has
Mhm.
historically been full of jerks, statistically, it is likely that they will remain full of jerks. That's. I feel like Gryffindor is like there are a lot of similar traits. There's willingness to kind of break out of your own, like go with what you believe a little bit more than necessarily the others, and speak out for yourself. But I do think that, like, you see with Lucius Malfoy. I don't know if he's in this book or not, but he's Draco's father, and he is a horrendous jerk. So, like, there is no surprise on where he gets these views. So,
No,
not
yeah,
that
it's
not that you can't
understandable
be
that.
held accountable for them, but there's really no like mystery as to how these people became the people they are. And and maybe we see the Slytherins as a whole versus the ones that, like, just are getting by. It's hard to believe that every single Slytherin versus.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, I
Okay.
agree. Yeah,
You cut
I'm
out.
sorry. I thought. I'm sorry. No, no, I definitely agree with that. And the reason why I brought up the Slytherins, while we may have gone off on a tangent a little bit, but it's because the first thing that Hagrid says to Harry when they're in Diagon Alley, which the Diagon Alley was one of my favorite parts of the book. I really enjoyed it. because you experience Harry's wonderment as he's walking around. Like, I could really feel his excitement as
Mm-hmm.
he's walking around Diagon and experiencing all this, the sights and the sounds. And the reason why I did bring up the Slytherin is because Hagrid basically mentions that Slytherin, don't worry about what house you get into as long as it's not Slytherin.
Right. Yeah,
So
correct. True.
yeah, so that's why I brought it up, because that thread runs throughout the first book, and then it
Mm-hmm.
just continues in the 10th. But going back to moments that I love, the Diagon Alley was definitely a moment I truly enjoyed, because I felt like I was experiencing Harry's first time with him.
Right.
So I really loved that moment in the book.
Yeah. I'm trying not to sneeze, so I'm going to be quiet for a minute and then sneeze.
Okay.
I think it got scared away. I don't know. We'll see. It will probably visit us again later on just for extra excitement. Um for me, I felt like um the moment that I actually, like, I'm gonna, instead of a particular moment, like when we find out that the reason Harry lived, when we find out at the end of the book that the reason that Harry lived through, the attack in their home when he was young, and why Quirrell's attack didn't actually kill him, was that his mother's love saved him. And when I was younger, like, I guess I was like in my mid to early 20s when I first read this, I was like, well, I guess she couldn't think of anything. But now, as I look at how she started writing this book, she was like very, very poor single mother. And she didn't have a lot of resources, and that's a constant state of concern. And it's a constant state of concern when you're on your own, but it's also like worse when you have someone depending on you. And now, after the pandemic hit, I really got a much different reading. Like, when you're considering your mortality and you have a person, like a little person or a bigger person, did you make them strong enough that they'll survive? Did you make them strong enough that they'll survive the loss of you? Did you make them strong enough that they'll be successful? And I really do think that that's, unintentionally or intentionally, a really good way that I could read that now. That, like, her love, just her love, nothing else, not her lessons, not teaching him how to cook, not, all of those things were less important than her love, that he knew he was loved.
Yeah, you stating that Harry knowing that he was loved would be more important than other things she may have been able to teach him had she lived also resonates with me, because throughout this book, and you first meet the Weasleys, who in many ways become his family.
Mm-hmm.
uh, there are moments in not so much in this book, because he doesn't spend much time with Mrs. Weasley or Mr. Weasley, but just their introduction alone, when Mrs. Weasley realizes he needs help and she helps him, and she also realizes that he's very famous in their world and his fame is something that he didn't ask for, that he may be overwhelmed by it. She encourages her children not to gawk at him, not to
Mm-hmm.
ask him questions that will make him uncomfortable, basically to treat him as you would any other person.
Right.
And there are moments, I think it may be the third book. This is after Harry is in the hospital. Sirius, I think, has been, is it? No, I'm sorry, it's the fourth book, not the third one. So basically, Harry has escaped his ordeal with Voldemort. He's hospitalized, and Mrs. Weasley is there, and she hugs him. And Harry makes like a reference to that, that he never realized how good a hug could feel. I think he breaks down
Mm-hmm.
at that point because he's never had a mother to hug him. He's never been held.
Right.
So the importance of physical contact, the importance of knowing that he's loved
Right. And
is
that,
very important to Harry. So yeah, you were saying, Amy?
oh no, I'm sorry, I interrupted you a bit there. And just the way she fusses over him, that he's never experienced that because he witnessed it. He witnessed it to a fairly toxic extent with Dudley, but the way that somebody who loves you desperately will take care of you. And if you have, if you're going to be away on Christmas, I'm going to make you an ugly sweater, like she really worked hard to make him
Yes, yeah,
feel
that,
part of the family.
I know, and that was another moment that touched me. It's in the first book when Harry experiences his first real Christmas and he's at Hogwarts. And it's really heartbreaking because he's not expecting any presents because he's
Right.
never received them. And as you said, Mrs. Weasley, I mean, it's also a testament to her character because I know that if I sent a bunch of presents to my sons and I know that my son has a really great friend, I'm not going to not send him something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's also a testament as a person that she includes Harry and she makes him a sweater, which
Right.
her children probably don't appreciate as much because they're so used to it. But for Harry, it's like the best gift that he ever receives.
Right.
So going back to what you mentioned about how it's his mother's love that shielded him, well, I guess the argument could be made, oh, that's very corny. Oh, could she not have thought of something else? But I think it also goes to the power of being loved because you can have everything. You can have physical wealth. You can be surrounded by people, but not feel loved, not feel welcomed, and not feel supported. So in the end, what does it really matter? I'm not saying that stability in terms of a home or like money isn't necessarily important
No,
to
they're good. They are
survive,
super, they
but
are super duper helpful.
yeah, yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. Them saying, "Oh, material possessions don't," but going with the thing that you can have everything, just as Draco Malfoy has everything. And Draco
Mm-hmm.
Malfoy is loved. I would never say that his parents don't love him,
Mm-hmm.
but he's the example of health. But he's sort of physically empty. There's not, he's not the best person and he has everything. Whereas, the Weasleys, money is always an issue. And you see this even in
Right.
the first book when Ron and Harry are sitting on the train, and Ron has these lumpy sandwiches, and he's so self-conscious. But Harry was like, "Oh," which also goes to show that Harry is a great person as well, where he makes Ron feel comfortable. He doesn't even he I think offers to take one, and to share his food.
Mm-hmm.
So the importance of love for me, the fact that it's love that protects him and that it's love is such a powerful form of magic that even the darkest, most powerful forms of dark magic cannot conquer it is kind of awesome. Um, and I could see how it would be encouraging, or it is encouraging to many people who may feel unloved, who may not have that sense of family, to at least find encouragement from it,
Mm-hmm.
or even like traditional forms of family, because this book does play around with a lot of what makes a family. Is family who you're born into, or it's family that you make? So for Harry's case, it's very much the family that he's made with the Weasleys, that he's made with Sirius and Lupin and everyone else. Eventually, it's not his biological family. So yeah,
Right.
so going back, the whole thing that love is what's keeping him safe, I think is extraordinary, and I think it is really beautiful.
Yeah. And and again, like back to my pre-prepared statement. It's that's just what you said is why um it's so devastating that this author made these statements because so many disenfranchised people used this book to gather around. And like there are all these like, LGBTQ sites that are dedicated to Harry Potter because he was an outcast, and it celebrates the outcast. And I was heartbroken for them, for people that lost their family over this or felt they did. Back off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's also a good point to also point out that, there are authors that I guess for modern sensibilities would be considered problematic. And you may have that feeling, well, this was the author's views. Can I still enjoy the book? Can I
Right.
still feel good about enjoying this book? And I think you still can, because
Right.
I think it's learning to separate the author from his or her work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if
And
that's any comfort for people that are genuinely hurt by Rowling's statements, but
mm-hmm.
at least that's what I could, where,
Right. Well, I read a lot about it today, and when I first started hearing about this, and Daniel Radcliffe, his statement was like the best. If you haven't read it, I totally recommend you do. Um, he sounded like Harry Potter. He killed it. Um, just about how I hope this doesn't ruin the story for you. And, I hope you can take from this what you've always taken and what you need. And I think as we see more and more content creators' lives come up, and it's like I actually named this week Problematic Authors Week because I'm also doing something for the library on Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice
Mhm.
in Wonderland, and there are a lot of questions about whether he had kind of an he was a pedophile, for lack of a better term. Like there are a lot of questions about the legacy he left behind. And scholars are all over the map on it. And so do you take what you can from their story and not their lives? Because then we're getting into a time where we're not going to be able to enjoy anything ever, because there's always going to be someone in some production that was problematic in some way. And I think we have to kind of make these personal decisions for ourselves. And a lot of people actually went to what they did was that instead of trying to limit everything in their lives, they've decided they're not going to spend another penny into her pocket. So they read the books they have, they listen to the books they have, but they're not going to go to the Harry Potter in in Disney World, and they're not going to watch any more movies. And that's a way to kind of take the situation and work with it as best you can.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, especially stating, going back to what you said about how there will always be something that you can find problematic, and then it sort of leaves you with the question, well, what can I read? What can I enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know too much about Carol, and I've read some things about what he supposedly did. J.M. Barrie also faced similar accusations, but the children of the family whom he was very close to, after his death, which at that point they had nothing to fear, necessarily nothing to hide, were very open in saying that he never behaved inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, at that point he had passed away, so there was no fear where there could be some kind of reprisal, or if that's even the correct word that I'm using right now, but that there was
It
any fear that he might, yeah, for a moment I had a thought I used the wrong word,
I
that
know,
he
that's
may
always
like
fun.
get revenge. yeah, or do something against the family. And it was, I think, the eldest brother. And he said, no, he never behaved inappropriately. He never did anything to us.
Hmm.
So I think also, and I won't spend too long on this topic. I don't want to get too off track, but
Hmm.
basically I think that certain cultural mores that existed at that time, like even if you look at some of the, I remember I was looking at cards that were designed during that time, which featured a lot of naked children.
Right.
Now, if
Yeah.
we look at those cards now, our tendency is like, oh, well, those were pedophiles. But children were seen as pure, children were seen as innocent. So the
Hmm.
depiction of them as naked was to arouse something from like a person who was perverted. It was just to sort of emphasize that purity. So I think
Right.
also we have to be very careful about putting in our own prejudice or our own, I don't really like this term, but sensibilities onto things of the past. I'm not saying that we can't critique, we can't offer an opinion, but I think it's very important to understand the cultural background of a culture that you may be for a particular time. And I'll end it that way. I'll get off, but I think it's very, but going back to this series, I still think it's worth reading. I
Oh, for
still think you
sure.
can enjoy series, and you can take what you want from it.
Hmm.
Another thing with Rowling is what I will say is even if you don't agree with her, she is entitled to her opinions. I read the tweet and I said, okay, I don't mean to what's the word I'm looking, belittle or say that a person who's offended by something does not have the right to feel that way. That's not what I'm saying. But I think we can also make that mistake where, because I don't like what you said, don't say it. Like I said, she's entitled, and you are entitled at this point to say, I'm not going to support her. I'm not, that is your right. As a consumer, you have the right to say, I'm not financially supporting her. Because I don't agree with what she said. That is your right, and I, say you have the right to exercise that right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that people are feeling offended by it because, like, I know it can be heartbreaking when you love an author and he or she expresses something and it makes you, oh, now do I
Yeah.
still have the same feelings?
Right.
Um,
But like, does it help you in any way to just be able to accept? Not, I mean, I'm never gonna say like, wow, she seems like someone I want in my life, but I don't think that after the time I've spent and thinking about it, and it makes me so happy that people think that Snape is trans. Like people's
mm,
opinions on all the stuff that they made with their own experiences in mind, like, is a reminder that any work that you create and put out there is not any longer just yours. People are entitled to make their own decisions on what the characters look like, how they are motivated, and I think that this is an excellent example of taking what you need. But let's jump. We have like a few minutes left for recording. um what would you see in the Mirror of Erised?
oh, well, that was one of the things that I actually brought up as one of my favorite moments in the book. Because the Mirror of Erised shows you what your heart desires. Honestly, if I would look into it, this is so vague. I don't know. I guess, well, maybe what I would want to see is me happy. And I mean, I don't know what that happiness would look like per se. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
vague state. But for me, it's always important to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So very vague, and I don't know exactly what form that happiness would take necessarily. But yeah, I think I would just like to see myself happy, whatever that would be. But I was
Mm-hmm.
curious about Dumbledore. about what he truly sees in the Mirror of Erised, because I highly doubt it's him holding a pair of socks. And the reason why I brought it up is because in the second film of the Fantastic Beasts series, there's a beautiful moment when a young Dumbledore pulls off the cloth covering the mirror of Erised, I don't know how to pronounce it, and he sees himself even younger with Grindelwald.
Aww.
Yeah, and it's a very beautiful moment. I guess it was one of the few moments where they decided to show that Dumbledore is gay without, like, I guess overtly showing that he was gay. I had my own issues on that, but that could probably be another podcast. But so basically, you see the two of them when they were very young, and that's when they make that blood pact. Which I don't know if you are going to watch the other films. But they make
I
a blood
don't have
pact,
any
and that's
time to watch a whole movie. So go on.
yeah. So basically, they make a blood pact, and that's what he sees in the Mirror of Erised.
Right.
So, theorizing that what Dumbledore actually sees when he looks into it is Grindelwald, and
Mhm.
basically that feeling of disappointment and longing that he may actually be seeing. So yeah.
Right.
So, but
Yeah,
what would you see into
oh,
it?
I think I'd probably just see, like, a party, like, with, like, everybody that I care about at it and having a really good time and obviously healthy. I think that's probably the best. And especially right now that I'm super party starved and super outside of my house starved other than nature.
Mhm.
I think I can safely say that the Mirror of Erised would show me a lot of hugs and getting together with people and just really living my best life with people I care about.
So I'm noticing that our producer has left us a little message.
Oh no,
So
I
Lewis
my
said,
screen keeps falling asleep.
"Oh, so I'll read it. So with money and reality being put aside, what would you give to Harry Potter for his 39th birthday?"
Ooh.
That is a good. With money and reality being put aside, what would you give to Harry Potter? I don't like assuming that he is still living his best life right now, like assuming that he and Jane are still married and the kids are doing okay, because thinking about the whole half blood, no, what's the play called? The Cursed Child.
Right,
Like
right.
Harry was having a difficult time with I can't even remember his son's name that he's having a difficult time with.
I never read it,
Is it Albus,
unfortunately.
the one in Oh,
We can call it
well,
Elvis.
assuming that his married life, well, I'll call him. I know one of his kids is Albus. I'm not sure if that's the one he's having issues with. Well, assuming that, he's repaired that relationship, I don't know. What would he need? I have no clue. I don't know what I would give him.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know what I would give Harry for his 39th birthday, but we can open that up to our listeners. Like, what would you give
Uh,
Harry Potter for his 39th birthday?
I would
It's a
give
good question.
him I think I would give him like a top of the line, like really snazzy broom with the assumption that with kids and all of and like wife, kids, house or apartment or all those things that he's probably not getting himself the fanciest brooms. And I think it would be good for him to have something of his own.
I think so too. And another thing, since the broom is sort of connected to his love of flying, and this is when I'm going to do this really quickly. I know we don't have much time, but we're introduced to the game of Quidditch. Now, one of the things that bothered me about the Wizarding World was that they don't have any other sports but Quidditch, which I found very odd. It's
Yes.
like, because in our we have soccer, basketball, rugby, tennis, golf. It's like, I don't know whether she thought it would just be too confusing, but even if your world never focused on what the wizarding equivalent of soccer would be, or like basketball, which I guess is maybe what Quidditch is. Like, couldn't you have a throwaway line to like another sport that the wizarding community like loves?
Right.
Like that part, like it kind of bothered me. I was like, considering how rich her world is, that the wizards would not have any other sports that they enjoyed or like any other recreational activities. Like I always
Right.
found
Yeah.
that odd. I don't know.
I have never, I don't think really thought of it that way, but yeah, they're complete lack. And again, though, we really don't see necessarily much of the day-to-day life of people that aren't in school. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
hard to tell, but yeah, there's like no TV. There's no, yeah, like there's books, and all the books that you see are just about either Quidditch or academics. So, that's a really good point. That's that she definitely didn't fill out that part very well.
And especially considering that, in Britain, and hopefully I'm not saying something that's like this is not true, but rugby. No, wait, is rugby
Cricket.
popular
Are
there
you
too?
thinking
Maybe I'm.
rugby is, cricket is?
Okay, so those, because I was thinking about some of the popular sports in Britain, and I was kind of thinking that she could have developed sports that are like somehow connected to Quidditch. Because when I think about Quidditch, I do kind of see it as like a rugby soccer combination, because
Mm.
especially the fact that they have the oh, what are they called? No, not bludgers. What are they? Are they called
Uh,
bludgers? The two
Blodgers.
that knock.
Wait,
Oh, okay.
wait. Okay, so there's the
I
snitch.
just read the book too.
There's the,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's something like that. And there's the
Yeah. So basically,
quaffle. Um,
yeah.
you keep talking. I'll figure it out. Hold on. Keep
Because I
talking.
was just thinking about the two team members that are responsible for making sure that the bludger doesn't hit their teammates, but they'll knock it into the other team. That kind of reminds me of rugby, because rugby is very high contact, like you're tackling people. More so, and almost like it's like football too, because football, there are those. I don't know football, so I'm not going to be using terms, but there are like the players that will like are responsible for tackling the person running the ball. I don't know football, guys. So I won't be using
I don't.
terms.
I don't
But
either.
so it reminded me of a combination of those three sports. Um, but yeah, anyway, it just kind of like I kind of wish I would have heard about what's the wizarding equivalent of golf. What's what does it
Well,
involve? Like it's just I don't know. That kind of bothered me in rereading this, because there's the classmate Dean Thomas who
mm-hmm,
loves soccer. One of the funny moments in the book is him discussing soccer with Ron, who can't understand how you could enjoy a sport without brooms, like how it
mm-hmm.
could be so fun.
Right,
And I was like, and why don't they have other sports?
right.
And maybe they do. I mean, and I know that her world is heavily focused in Britain. It makes sense. That's where Hogwarts is. But like you get the feeling that every single wizarding community, it's all Quidditch. Like every country loves Quidditch. Or like there are plenty of countries where like basketball isn't like on their radar, and like they're happy with like other sports. So I'm like, I don't know. That kind of always bothered me, but whatever.
No,
You
that's
know,
a good
I'll
point.
I'll survive.
I would be, I imagine like the D&D or video game person. But like the thing is like the idea of having magic, what else do you
Hmm.
need? What else do you need? Like you don't need any
True.
hobbies. You have magic.
Well,
I
Dumbledore mentioned that he loves knitting.
That's
Like,
true. Oh, and you see Hagrid knitting. Hagrid's knitting in the first in the very first, like when they're taking the train to Diagon
yes,
Alley.
yes,
Yep.
he's knitting.
So
Which
yeah,
which
there's
is never
knitting
meant.
and Quidditch.
Yeah, so okay, so you're right. There are other recreational activities that are mentioned, but I'm seeing that we're like at 12:58 right now. So I
Right.
guess what I'll just well, before we conclude, I just wanted to mention something that the confrontation with Voldemort at the end was very underwhelming for me.
True.
Now the confrontations as the series progressed, but I just wanted to conclude with that note that it was a very underwhelming moment.
I
I
get
was
that.
expecting a
Yeah.
lot more considering but
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you
Can I
again
give
for
a complaint
joining us
too?
with the front of
I have
Oh,
a
sure. Yeah,
complaint
yeah. I'm
too.
sorry. I didn't mean to.
That's okay.
Yes.
Just the diversity situation was a little challenging because there are like four people of color. I think there are the Parvat, there are the Patils, Cho Chang, and now I can't remember his name. Dean Thomas.
Dean Thomas. There's also Blaze Zabini.
Okay, so five.
Yeah, and I know she's been called out on that before,
Oh,
but
she
like I said, that
definitely has. I didn't. It wasn't worth
that could be a whole
belaboring,
other
but
podcast episode where we talk about that. Could go on
pick
and
on
on.
people.
I
That's
know.
actually our new podcast is Simona and Amy pick on things.
Pick on things. Yes, it's a good idea. That could be an offshoot podcast. Um, So once again, Amy and I, we want to thank you for listening. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and we hope that you love Harry Potter as much as we do, that you continue reading, that you continue critiquing, and just, forming your own opinions on this series. And we do hope, in spite of any negativity, you do find things to love about the series and you really make it your own, is, what I at least hope for when you read this series. So thank you again for listening to us.
Yep. Have a great day and stay safe.
Yes, stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.